I'd like to call this development committee meeting to order. Kathy, would you please take roll?
Lee,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Walter.
Yes.
All right, we'll dive right into this. So I'd just like to let the record show that we have Mr. Schrock, the mayor, Mr. Nicholson, and Mr. Fulton all here from staff to weigh in on this. I'll just dive right into it. The reason I called this meeting kind of on short notice, we were presented this letter that everyone has in front of us from Park Shea, Shea Commercial Real Estate, about a potential development in Corporate Park that sounded very promising and does not, I wouldn't say that it's gone by any means, but I would say that we've hit some pretty significant snags. In the letter, you can see he gives us a pretty nice reason why. Honestly, I kind of overlooked this. I thought our biggest challenges out there were the sewer being the biggest one. So this is another challenge that we need to look at. The reason I think it was important that we meet tonight is because while the developer may have said that he's not coming here, he has not found another place, and he's still on the market. So I thought we could discuss this and see if we could somehow maybe throw a lifeline at it. I don't think that it's gonna happen overnight, but I think it shows that we're willing to look at it. So the question is with the tax overlay, the 1% city income tax on top of the 1.75 JED tax, the 1.75 JED tax appears to be the issue. So I'm going to pass this over to Jamie. I believe you are our liaison or board member to the JED, the JED committee. And just some oversight, obviously, you know, this committee's not suggesting any changes be made. I think that maybe what we're looking is, what's the process to have, to kind of take a look at this and take some of these challenges into consideration.
Okay, so stepping back, there are a lot of players in the JED. So you have Licking County, who took on the debt for the infrastructure improvements. You have City of Newark Tax Department is the collector, but City of Newark is also in there. You have Harrison Township.
Fire department?
I don't know. I can't remember who all the players are. There's a lot of players. Bottom line, all those parties signed off on the original documents that created the JED. And I would have to imagine, I'm not a lawyer, but I would have to imagine it would take every one of those bodies independently. So let's say you directed me to go to the JED and ask for it to be removed from the JED. We would probably have to go to every single one of those governing bodies and have them approve that. And quite frankly, from a mechanics, that'd be hard enough. Politically, you have Licking County that's still carrying debt service. The likelihood of them walking away from their revenue to help pay for the debt service is probably slim. Not saying it wouldn't happen, but that's a consideration to keep in mind. So, although I'm on the JED board or serve to the JED, ultimately all the players on that have to represent. Make a tick note on that one.
Let's see.
Even though, you know, we represent the parties, ultimately, you know, for example, even though I may represent the task on it, I represent what you guys tell me. You know, so if there's a direction and you guys all vote to say, yes, we're gonna do something, then that's what I represent in my vote on the JED board. But I can't unilaterally vote, for example, for them. I'd have to have your guys' direction for that. Right now, the JED is 1.75. A piece of it goes off the top and goes into an infrastructure fund. We hold that money. It's in a special revenue fund, and it's to be used for infrastructure improvements to the park. The thought was at some point, if the road would need widening to accommodate, the traffic or what have you, probably water sewer line, there's not a lot in there right now, but that's what that fund would be accumulated for. The money then is divvied up amongst all the players by certain percentages. We end up with about 82 basis points, which is 0.82%, about 0.8% of income tax in the JED from the JED itself. There have been questions of can we just not collect the JED tax in the park? Short answer to that is really no, because it was a voted tax, just like the income taxes. The JED was voted on by the residents of Tasqua and approved. So when you have a voted tax, obviously you have to collect it. Now, with that said, we can, and I call it a rebate, not a refund because that's a different process, but a rebate, you know, we could come up with an agreement whereby we could rebate the amount of money that we are getting, that 0.8%, we could rebate that to them up to the point where we have what are called non-tax revenues. So non-tax revenues, as the name would apply, is anything other than a tax. So permits, registration fees, grants, fines and forfeitures, those types of revenues, miscellaneous revenues that we get, user fees, permit fees. All of that is, if you add that up, I could rebate up to the level that that number is. Now I ran a quick calculation. You know, one-off for one property owner would not be an issue. We'd be well under the threshold, not a problem. That could not realistically become a standard, because if you start getting 2, 3, 4, 5, it's cumulative, and then you get to the point where basically you're giving away all the non-tax revenues that we would have otherwise received in the city. So that was one approach. You know, the 1%, again, it's the same issue. You can't.
Well, we only get half the 1% anyway, we can't do anything.
Right, right. And so that's kind of where the process lies.
Can I ask you a question? Did you say that the JED was voted on by the
That was my understanding. Is that not the case?
I thought it was
Was that just a council action?
I thought that the JED was a council action, not
Okay.
voted. The income tax was voted on by the residents, but not the JED.
Okay.
No, I think the JED's a council action.
Okay, if it was a council
JED was
action.
not on the ballot.
Then it's a little different,
Okay,
yeah. So
that
council
confused me for a minute.
Sorry, I assumed it was.
Okay.
It was before I got here. So yeah, council could work with the other parties. You know, it's a legal action. You have to get all the parties to concur that, for example, we pull out this parcel out of the JED so that it's not subject to it. You know, Mr. Emsweiler is also one of the parties on the board, so you have to have all the parties basically agree. Not saying it can't be done, but when you got that many parties, it becomes more of a challenge.
So my 2 cents, and then I'm gonna hand it over to the committee, so, and I just wanna throw it out there, I did speak with President Barstow about this, just to get some clarifications on, you know, what took council action, what can be done at the committee level. Obviously, if there was any type of change to any numbers, that's a full council, discussion and action. What I talked to him about, and what I wanna, throw out to the committee is obviously this is my opinion, we can't forfeit any of our 1%. We're already forfeiting half of it to the schools by state statute. My thought would be, now that we have this letter from a, you know, that I think is very valuable, I always like feedback, whether we wanna hear it or not. I would be in favor of the JED board convening and just discussing if they're willing to help us out here a little bit, or help the area out, because, you know, if this is gonna be a hindrance the entire time to that 500+ acres, you know, is there a happy medium or something we can negotiate? Because, you know, 1.75 sounds great, but, you know, if we don't have anything there, it's still 0. So I'm just in favor of a discussion, not any changes, and I think that we can, like, again, talking to Mr. Barstow, direction for a discussion out of a committee is appropriate, in his opinion. So I'm gonna turn it over to the committee and hear their thoughts, so. Let's go down the, Ms. Carter, you wanna start?
I mean, I guess, I mean, we could ask them to convene and see if they would help us out any. I mean, clearly, our corporate park's been there for a while. We haven't had any action on it. The JED was put into place before. We got our income tax in place, shortly, but still before. So, I personally, I don't think they're gonna do anything for us. But I'm not willing to give up anything as far as the city's portion of any of the income tax that, or that the city would get it all.
Well, yeah, we can't give them.
Nope.
So, okay, anything else? Mr. Walker?
So, my question would be to our city attorney would be, what is the maximum income tax that can be collected through state statute?
In the JED?
In property that would be within the JED? Not the JED per se, but just that property. What's the maximum income tax that can be collected off of that property?
I don't think that there are limits as far as income tax goes. Property tax, obviously, there's inside millage, those types of things outside, you have to vote on it, and it be a voted levy. Income tax, more than 1%, like we had, well, we had one, but, you know, 1% or greater than 1%, you have to have a vote of the people. So, we're not talking about changing the city's income tax, we're talking about the JED. The JED documents call, and I'm assuming it mirrors state law. I have to assume Dennis Schwaller was the legal counsel on it, I'm assuming that it all was structured similarly. Basically, it says, of all the parties that have an income tax, the highest rate in the park, is set, can be no higher than the highest of any one of the parties. So, Newark had a 1.75, I think it was Newark.
I believe that's correct.
Yeah, and so they picked that rate as the JED rate. That's why it was set at 1.75. They went with the highest of the players. The 1%, and this was a question that was posed, Connie didn't believe that you could have the 1.75 and have the city income tax. And we went to Brian, and Brian concurred that, or dissented, or whatever. He said that no, the 1% is overlaid on top of the 1.75. I'm not aware of any state statutes, and that'd be a Brian question, that would say you can't have more than 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%. I don't know. It's more of a pain threshold, I think, politically, than it is a legal thing.
Okay. I've always been under the impression there is a limit, but I would have to look that up also to figure out in a JED situation. You know, on page 13, it does actually contemplate the city passing the income tax. And it says we can collect that income tax and we can credit, which we don't, we can credit back any residents that work in the city, the same amount, and we can also credit back anybody who works outside of the city per that, you know, as some municipalities do. We don't do that.
Actually, the Pataskala tax code provides for, if you live in Pataskala and you work in the JED, you still have to pay the 1% withheld at the time of employment and the 1.75. Then when you fill out your return at the end of the year, you get a credit for up to the 1% that you paid to Rita. So basically, you'll end up getting that 1% refunded back to you.
So in essence, I wanted to clarify, so in essence, if all of the, I'm just making sure, this is something to point out to the JED board.
Yes.
In essence, if everybody who worked in the JED lived in Pataskala, we would be forfeiting our 1%, 100%.
Yes.
What would the school end up doing?
And I pushed on this one. It wasn't well received. They want to be made whole regardless of if we refund the money. So they get their distribution even though we have to refund the money to our residents.
So what's even worse in this situation is it costs us to have them in the JED. If they all live there.
Hypothetically, if
Quite
there are
frankly.
100 employees, they're all 100% residents of Pataskala, yeah.
Yep.
Definitely.
It does.
Just making sure
No, I agree.
I want to make sure we were aware of that.
Yeah.
It's not a good deal. So, okay. So I guess the other question I'd have is, Jamie, in your experience with this, has there been any JED board meetings where an amendment to this agreement has been proposed and turned down, or even thought of bringing in some of this contemplated, now that we have it, well, now that we have an income tax, at least making us competitive with other, whether it be Newark, in their areas, in their commercial areas, their JEDs, areas, or Hebron, or anywhere else. Has there ever been any discussion of that?
No, there really hasn't. It's been focused on more on finding people to come look at the parcels, the marketing of the property, that type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, I think, it's a discussion worth having.
I think if the properties are equal in taxation, they may not be equal to whether they have access or whether they have the amount of water or whatever, those are totally separate issues, but at least making them equal in taxation would seem to be reasonable for anybody who's participating in this, and participating in outside JEDs also. That's my thought on it.
I agree.
Okay. So can we do that? I guess I'm leading to possibly some direction to look into those things and seeing if there's something out there that we can compare and contrast to for ours, so that we can have something to stand on, a leg to stand on when we go to the JED board. Say, this is our position. We're not just asking for some help. We're saying, hey, we want to at least be competitive with you guys.
My suggestion would be to loop in Dennis Schwally, to have those conversations, what he thinks would be the best approach. Can we do it? How would we go about doing it? Because obviously the whole JED, the JED is a legal document. I mean, that's what it's formed on. So it may make sense to have that conversation. He's been around a long time. He might be able to say, okay, here's some suggestions of what you want to do, what you don't want to do, or what you can't do. I mean, there could be some restrictions in there that says basically you got no flexibility at all.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's worth asking, absolutely, so that we don't waste our time and effort, because otherwise, it's gonna be, it's not going to be developed as commercial. It'll be something else, probably, but, and the last part to that question is just to point out, we do have one entity there now. And so, I wonder how they play into, as a member, or as a entity within the JED, what say they may have.
I think Mr. Barstow kind of noticed it, that the original structure of the JED was a little different because we had no businesses in the JED. So you had the property owner, and he was really the only employee or employer. So I think his CPA was on the board, and I think Harrison Township. So I think at some point, like now that we have AEP, I think AEP is probably supposed to have the rep on the board because they really are the employer in the district.
That's kind of what I was asking.
Yeah, and so I mean, that's a council thing, but yeah, I think Todd noticed that, and I think that's probably gonna be some action taken on that.
Okay, that's all I had.
So, I'd just like to mention too, that, if this committee does, give, I want to believe Mr. Nicholson, the go-ahead to call a meeting and discuss this, I would think we would not only want Mr. Schwally there, but we're 2 weeks away from a city administrator, so I would think that person would need to be involved in that. So, I'm in favor of that direction, but I just wanted to see where everyone else was. Mel, are you any opposition to?
I'm not, I would prefer to wait until we had a city administrator in place so they could be in the discussions from the beginning.
That's what I would say. I would want to wait.
Yeah, so that would be fine. I wouldn't be opposed to it, but I would like to wait until that point in time.
Yeah.
Given the environment that we're operating in today, I'm not sure the JED board necessarily will be in any hurry to come here and sit in a meeting and talk, so that probably won't become a problem, I'm guessing. To at least have the administrator on board by the
You
time
don't
of the
think they
meeting.
wanna cozy up with us?
Trying to be in compliance with state law, come on. But, there, you have people who may not feel comfortable coming into City Hall for a JED meeting. So it may take 3 weeks, 4 weeks, a month before we can get a meeting going with them. So with that, I think the timing will work well with the new city administrator coming in. Yeah.
Well, with that being said, I just wanna make sure that Scott and Chris, do you guys have anything you wanna weigh in on this discussion?
I do not.
Same here. I have nothing further. I think it's a good course of action to take.
Mayor? Okay. So I'm gonna make a motion, to direct Mr. Nicholson and the future city administrator, whoever that shall be, with assistance of Mr. Schwally, to reach out to the JED board to have a discussion to see if there's, any flexibility in, the agreement in place.
I'll second that.
Carter,
Yes,
Walter,
Yes?
Lee,
Yes. All right. Anybody have anything else? Okay. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
second,
Carter,
yes.
Walter,
Yes?
Lee.
Yes. Timmy?
Hey, guys.
Usually we yell at people when they get their cell phone on.
Can they make a motion to direct the city